So we're on Ayin Tef on the Bais. We're actually 3 lines from the bottom. However, the Mishnah said three examples. The Mishnah gave us 3 examples of a carbon taida which is a Thanksgiving offering, that someone, for whatever reason, he's got a second one. Those possibilities are either his carbon taida gave birth to a child, so now he has another one, or he lost his taida, so he designated a second one, and then he found the first one. Or he said, Zu tachazu. He says, I'm going to exchange this taida for this one. I want a different, I'm going to bring a different animal. Menachem Bais on the bottom. So the rule of all of those was that only the real taida requires bread, the other one doesn't require the bread. Because the taida comes along with 40 chalas. Then we had a Bais. The Bais divided it into 2 categories. One was if someone separates a second taida because he lost his first one. And in that case we said that he's able to bring whichever one he wants when he finds the first one and they're both there. He can bring whichever one he wants. And the first one he brings his bread. It brings the bread with it. The second one doesn't get the bread. The second case was the child of the taida. In the Tmura, over there we say similar, but not 100%. Over there we just say that the second one doesn't get the bread. That's what we say. Maybe it's not brought. Say no, it's brought, but it doesn't get the bread. Okay, we'll see exactly what the difference is. So we're up to Shalach le Rab Chanina Mishmei Rabbi Yochanan.
So how many lines is this?
It's 3 lines from the bottom in the middle of the line. In my Gemara there's a period, okay. So it's easier.
Okay.
But Rabbi Chanina sends in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shanu. This was not taught, Ela la'achar kapara. When do we say that the offspring of the taida doesn't need the bread? That's only if it's brought second. In other words, the mother was brought first. Avalifnei kapara. But if you bring the child first, tunim lechem, then it would require bread. Which means it's exactly the same as we said if someone replaces his taida for the lost one. That's exactly what we said over there. The Bais didn't say this regarding the child. Rabbi Yochanan is adding that in. However, heavy bar Rabbi Amram deliberated on this. The word heavy is like usually it's translated Rabbi Amram asked, but heavy means he stayed on it. He deliberated on this. Hey, what's the case that Rabbi Yochanan is talking about when he says Lo shanu? I sort of explained it, but the Gemara is going to go through the options. You have 2 possibilities. Of how you bring the carbon taida. It's actually a 3rd possibility. The 2 possibilities are someone says this animal here, beautiful. Thank you. This animal is a taida. Now what happens if he loses that animal? He doesn't have to bring another one. If he never had to bring a taida. You see, normally a taida is brought by someone that a miracle happened for, or he survived something, one of the 4 categories. He either was sick or in prison, or he went over the sea, or he went over the desert. But let's say he's just giving a Thanksgiving offering, he's just like happy about life, he wants to give. It's not really an obligation. And he says this animal is a taida. And the animal dies, he doesn't have to bring another one. He designated an animal and it's not here anymore. If he says, I'm accepting on myself a taida, it's called Harei Eily, so then if the animal that he thought he would bring dies, he has to bring another one because he accepted it on himself. It wasn't a specific animal. There's a difference, Harei Zu or Harei Eily.
Is there a chiluk, Rabbi, between, like, if you go, like you said, the four chiyuvim, right? They're mechuyev to bring a taida, right?
Yeah.
Whereas it's not a mechuyev if you just say, I want to thank Hashem.
Yeah, but if he accepts on himself, Harei Eily, that I'm going to bring a karban, so then even if he loses the karban that he thought he's going to bring, he has to bring another one. So, but if he says Harei Zu, and he had no obligation, so if he loses, like, oh well, I lost it, that's it. So the Rav Amram is discussing which case are we saying we
Does
are...
that apply to anything you say? You say Harei Zu and it's mois, and
Yeah.
he loses the mois.
Well, it could be...
You're not chayav achayusa?
No. I'm not sure how it works by money, because money is not like really money. Money is all lahitzanit, and I don't know if it works like that. But because that could be a value. But if it would be an item, then definitely it works. Look, he lost the item. It's not. So if we say that the case where he says it's before kapara, that's when you have to bring the bread, but after kapara not. So if you say achalife taidas chayva, we're talking about that he's exchanging because he lost his taida. He has an obligation to bring it, and he lost it. So he exchanges it. Now he has two. Ilifne kapara. If it's before, he's bringing the exchanged one now, and he's bringing it before he brings the original. So, what does Rabbi Yochanan say? You have to bring the bread.
There's no nafkamini. There's nothing wrong with chronologically bringing it out of order.
Right. There's nothing wrong with it. Rabbi Yochanan says that you bring the bread along with it. But guess what? Rabbi Yochanan said you bring out the bread, but the Bais also said you bring out the bread. So I don't need Rabbi Yochanan to tell me what the Bais says. Rabbi Yochanan is an Amoira, and the Bais, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't add to what the Bais is saying. So ilifnei kapara tanina, that I learned in the Bais. Usually tanina is a Mishnah. Over here it's a Bais. Ila achar kapara. If it's achar kapara where we say, oh, la achar kapara, you don't need to bring the bread. So that's also tanina. That the Bais also said that you only bring the first one. The breads with the first one, you don't bring the breads with the second one. The Bais explained, why don't you bring the breads with the second one? It says yakrivenu. You bring it. That means that here I have really two taidas. The first one was a taida, the second one was a taida, and it says that you only bring one, echad v'lei shnayim. You only bring the breads with one taida, not with two taidas. Okay. So I don't need Rabbi Yochanan to tell me this. Whichever one you bring first, that's the one that's going to get the bread. So we have to switch. Rather, we're talking about that it was an exchange. Why? Because one was lost, so you designated a second one. But this was a taidas nedava, and the taidas nedava is slightly different. That's when he says that this animal I'm going to bring as a taida, and he has no obligation to replace it. What did this person do? And it got lost. He replaced it. So it says, "Bein lefnei kapara, bein lacha kapara tunas lechem." Whether it's the first animal that he's bringing, the replacement, or it's the original animal that he brought first, and this is the replacement is second, doesn't matter. It's always going to require breads because marba b'taidasu. Since he had no obligation to replace it, so when he does replace it, so he's bringing another taida. So taida requires bread. So it's not that I don't need Rabbi Yochanan. It's Rabbi Yochanan's not accurate. Over here I wouldn't. This is what the Gemara does. The Gemara says, if it's true what you're saying, so I already know it. So you have to tell me a chiddush. You have to tell me a chiddush. I'll probably tell you that it's not true. There's a very fine line of getting a chiddush. That's okay. Ella avlad taidas nedava. Rather, we're talking about an offspring of a taida, and it's the offspring of a taida where the person did not need to replace it, but it wasn't lost. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about that it got lost. We're talking about that you have a second one because it gave birth, and he said Hare Zu. He says this animal is a taida. It wasn't lost. It just gave birth. Now I have two. So bein lifnei kapara bein lacha kapara into lechem. This is not accurate either, because according to Rabbi Yochanan, you would need to require bread with the first one that you bring. But if it's an offspring of a taida, it never requires the bread, even if you bring it first. Why? Because it's moisa de taidahi. This is like leftover money. Let's say a person says, this money I'm going to use to buy a taida. So he buys a taida, he has some change left over. He doesn't have to bring bread along with this other change. He brought his taida and that's it. The bread is the offspring is not an original taida. It's just leftover money. Ella blad taida schayva. It's different. Yeah. Let's get another Gemara. Want to use the big one? No, that's going to have. That's not going to have. You use the big one.
And a good chair. Good seats. Big things for me today.
We're holding Ella Blad the Schayva. Rather, what we're dealing with is that he had an obligation to bring a carbon taida. Why? Because he said Hare Eily, I'm accepting on myself. Or, like we said before, from Rashi, that he actually went through one of those situations where he's required to bring it. It wasn't a donation; it was an obligation. So then, what's going to happen here is, and it had a child. Ella, so it works like this: Lifnei kapara tal lechem. If he's bringing it first, then it's going to require bread. But liachar kapara ein ton lechem. But after he already brings the original, the mother, then the child doesn't require bread. Okay,
What's
this
the
is interesting.
What's the havamina? Why, if you bring it first,
That you
bread?
shouldn't. No.
If it's the tolda, right?
It's the told. It's the vlad.
Right.
And Rabbi Yochanan is telling me a chiddush that if you bring the child first, you bring the bread with the child. But if you bring the child second, you don't bring the bread with the child. Now, what Peretz is asking is, we sort of knew that before from the Brisa. The truth is, the Brisa only told me that if I had to replace it because I lost it. It said then you have an option, whichever one you want to bring first, you bring first. And whichever you bring first, you bring the bread with it. We didn't actually say that by if it had a child. By the child we said, yes, you bring both. But it didn't, and it said you're going to bring bread with one. But it didn't say, actually, did it say you only bring bread with one? And in the Brisa, it says, Yachal yutunas lechem. No, it doesn't require bread. So what does the Brisa mean that it doesn't require bread? This is the chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan. When the Brisa says that the second one doesn't require bread, the child doesn't require bread, Rabbi Yochanan is saying that it's only if you brought it after the mother. But if you brought it before the mother, the child does require bread. That's the pshat over here. That's the Loishana. Yes, yeah. The Rabbi Yochanan is saying that when the Brisa wasn't clear, it's talking about that the child doesn't require bread only if you brought it second. My Kamash Milan, what's Rabbi Yochanan teaching us? The Kasavar, in other words, what's the logic over here? The Kasavar Rabbi Yochanan, Adam Miskaper B'Shvach Ektish. A person can be atoned, he can fulfill his obligation with the profits of Hektish. Here, the Hektish had a child, Karban had a child, and he can bring the child along as a sacrifice, and that could be his main sacrifice. And that's a chiddush. So we'll see. Shmuel's going to disagree. Heavy banami abaya ki gavna. I love when the Gemara does this. It doesn't go through the whole thing. It says Abaya had the same question and he resolved it the same way. Okay. So who was before Rabamam, right? Heavy bar Rabamam. No, it's Abaya. Okay. It's Manami. We also have a statement which spells this out more clearly without the question, is it this, is it that? It just gives it to us in the different halachas. I'm not familiar with Rav Amram. He's a student of Rabbi Yochanan, obviously. No. I saw Rav Amram again today. Masav Rav Amram. We have him later. I don't know.
Right, what did I miss so far?
I'll tell you. No, I'm just thinking about the names. We're talking about if someone ends up with two sacrifices. He has one, but for certain reasons, he ends up with a second one, either because he lost it and he designated a new one, and then he finds the original, or he exchanged one for another, and the rule is that both of them become sacrifices. Or it had a child. So we're discussing, because of Korban Todah, you have to bring bread along with the sacrifice. So what about the second one? You bring the first one would get the bread. What about the second one? Does the second get the bread? So it's very clear that if someone loses the sacrifice, the bread comes with the first one and not with the second one, because they're both real taidas. However, if it has a child, we're not discussing the tumor yet. On the next page, we discuss the tumor. If it has a child, so then we have a chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan that if you bring the child first, you bring the breads with the child, with the offspring, and then the mother would not require. Your person was atoned for. It sounds like. However, if you bring the mother first, then you don't bring the breads with the child. So it would match up the same way as if it was lost. Itmanami, there was also a statement, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Chilufei Taidas Nidava. Someone exchanges a taida that he wasn't required to exchange. I said exchange, that's not the right word. Someone replaces a taida that he wasn't required to replace, because when he designated it in the first place, he said, this animal is a taida. There's a difference between if he says Harei Zu or Harei Alai. He says Harei Zu, this animal is a taida. If it gets lost, he doesn't need to replace it. But if he says, I accept on myself to bring a taida, then if the animal gets lost, he has to replace it, because he accepted on himself. It wasn't the animal.
So chilufei is al atzmoi or al
no, chilufei just means that he replaced it. Teidas nedava means that he said Harei Zu. He never needed to replace it. So bein lifnei kapara, bein lacher kapara tunin lechem. You have to, whether he brings the replacement first, whether he brings the replacement second, both of them require bread. We explained before, because marba b'taidasu, because he never needed to replace it. So he's just bringing an extra taida. So he's bringing two taidas. A taida requires bread. So what about vlad taidas nedava? Let's say if it gives birth, if it has a child, and he said this animal is a sacrifice, is a taida. Bein lefnei kapara, bein lachar kapara, ein tuna lechem. Whether it's before he brought the mother, or whether it's after he brought the mother, it doesn't require bread. Why? Because Moised the Taidu, it's just leftover money for a carbon taida. He only needs to bring one carbon taida, and that's the mother. And this is just extra money. It's like he designated money, and then there was some remaining. He doesn't need to bring it.
What if he decides to say, you know what, I want to designate the second one as a carbon taida?
Oh, so then that's a brand new carbon taida.
Okay.
But here he didn't do that.
Require lechem.
Then it would require lechem. He don't do, it's just leftover money. You don't have to bring bread with that.
But his intention originally is to bring one.
Right.
It was never to bring two.
Right. So the second, the child doesn't need, even if you bring the child first as a taida, you don't need to bring bread with it. Vlad taida schayva is a little different. This is when he has an obligation. It wasn't a gift. It was an obligation to bring a carbon taida. It's an obligation on him, and he designates an animal, and the animal has a child. Taisus discusses if the child uber yerachimai. This is whole discussion how to view a child of if it's another limb of the animal. So Rabbi Yochanan taught us before that lifnei kaparatun lechem, if you bring the child first, then it requires bread. Lacha kaparatun lechem. If it's brought second, then it doesn't require bread. Okay. It's the same thing. It's repeating it, but it's doing it without the questioning. You know, they found one of the manuscripts of Mesilas Yesharim recently, and they published it. So the Mesilas Yesharim is a classical Musar book from Ramchal, Menachem Sato. So we always had it, but it wasn't. There was no question and answer, and it was spread out straightforward. You know, they found in the manuscript that it was like a debate. There's someone questioning and this and this. So now they print both versions of it. One as a question and answer, and one as okay. So this second way that we have Rabbi Yochanan is just the statement. It's more fun when it's question and answer. People go to lectures; they just want the end, the question and answer period. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says. What Shmuel's going to say is a little bit vague. We're going to need to have patience to follow through the Gemara to see what it actually means. Kol shebechatas meisa, any case that had it been a chatas, we would say that this chatas cannot be brought. We just need to leave it to die. Whatever the scenario is, we'll see there's 5 cases of that. So then, a corresponding case by a taida, b'taida intun alechem. A corresponding case by a taida where we would not say that it should die. We would say that we would bring it. But if it would have been a chatas, we would say that it would die. If that case would be a taida where we would bring it, but it doesn't require bread. Kol shebechatas raya. Anything that by a chatas we would say does not die, but you would put it in the pan until it got a mum, until it got a blemish. So a corresponding case by a taida, b'taida tunelechem, that would require bread by a taida. So he's setting up these rules, and we have to see what he means and what's the case that he's referring to. Masav Rav Amram. You have Rav Amram again. Ram asked the question. What does it mean? He's quoting a Bais. I think it's the Bais that we had before. It says that Hatayda Yakrivenu, but we say that the word Yakriv was not necessary. Because it says afterwards, V'hikriv al zevach taida. The word yakr means to bring close. Minayin lemafrish taida sevav. How do we know that if someone separates his taida, when it says taida say, it means his taida, that means it's an obligation offering. It's an obligation because either he said, I'm accepting on myself, or it's because he actually went through an experience that requires him to bring a taida. Yeah, either he was sick or was in prison or went over the sea or went through the desert. The acronym is Chayim. B'chol HaChayim Yidu Chasela. Chayim is Chavash Yam Yisurim Midbar. That's the Torah brings in. So
it's interesting. Is this the only carbon that is on the one hand a reshus and then on the other hand an obligation?
No, I'm
just thinking. Just curious.
The shlamim you can bring. You see, a shlamim comes in different forms. This is a type of shlamim. And one of the types of shlamim is a taida. When a peace offering you would just bring as a gift. It wasn't because of a sin, or you would bring it as a gift. There were certain.
And then it becomes an obligation. In other words,
it becomes an obligation if you accept on yourself that I'm going to bring a shlamim. Then it becomes an obligation. So here there's another
Could you bring
point.
it without accepting on yourself? Just bring it. I don't want to bring it all the way to the base of Mikdash. It's a shlam.
Yeah, I think it needs to be designated. There needs to be some sort of kedusha to it.
that's not considered a taida. What he just said.
No, he's saying that you bring an
I'm saying
animal
if you
all
bring
the
stuff,
way
you bring an animal
with
to
no
the base of
obligation,
Mikdash.
and then it just
Consider
goes
it-
into the temple. You don't say anything, and this kohen
You
just
could say to the kohen, this is shlamim.
oh, so then this is a shlam.
You have to tell the kohen. The kohen
Right.
doesn't know.
Right.
Can't read your mind. By saying this is shlamim.
This is a shlamim. You make it a shlamim.
And it becomes obligated.
It's not an obligation on him. It's just this is the shlamim. This gets lost before the kohen gets the then.
Right.
you're basically saying Gaimel is a replacement for a Taylor?
Yeah, we bench Gaimel as the Taylor. Today, the Mishnah Berurah writes that if someone's supposed to bring a Taylor, he should give money to the yeshiva or something. Did you ever see that? I saw it in the Mishnah Berurah.
I didn't hear that.
You're yaitza many times over with tuition. So,
It was wide open.
How do we know that someone that designates as taida va'avda and it gets lost? And he designates another one as a replacement. And then he finds the first one. Now he has two. And behold, they're both standing there. How do we know that he can bring either one, whichever one he wants? And he's going to bring the bread together with that first one. It says, yeah, the taida you bring, and it sounds like it's like vague, whichever one you want. Is it possible, or could I think that maybe the second one will require bread as well? And there's a dagish in the nun, which means that it's singular. You bring him, you bring it. That means only one. Only one gets the bread. That's what the Gemara is understanding. Okay. So the first one gets the bread and not the second one. Now let's see what would be that case by a chatas. What's the story? Someone did a sin. He has to bring a chatas. The chatas gets lost. He replaces it, and then the first one reappears, and now they're both there. So what's going to be the din? If there's a chatas with the similar case, the rule is raya. You let it pasture until it gets a mum. What does Shmuel say? Raya. That means you have to bring bread. It's not going to fit. Because we say by us that you only bring bread with the first one, not with the second one. Shmuel says that anything that, if it would be a chatas, would be put to death.
You're letting it die, right?
No. If it gets a mum, then it gets redeemed. After the mum, it gets redeemed. Shmuel says anything that a chatas would have to die, the animal would have to die, you don't bring bread with it. Anything that the chatas would be put into the pen to get a mum and then you could redeem it. As a mum, it's not a sacrifice, and it has a blemish, it's not a sacrifice anymore. So then you do bring bread with it. But here we have a case where if it would be a chatas, you would put it into the pen to get a mum. In the corresponding case, by a taida, you don't bring bread with it. So it's a question on Shmuel. Shmuel's correlation doesn't match. The Tanan, as it was taught in the Mishnah, the case goes like this: Hifish chatasei, someone designated as chatas va'avda, and it got lost. V'hifish acher tachta, so he replaced it with another one. V'nimtus rishayna, now he has the first one as well. Barishtei ma'imda, and both of them are in front of him. So miskaper b'achas miyam, you can use either one. V'shniya tamas, but the second one has to be put to death. Divrei Rabbi, that's the words of Rabbi. Okay, so it's clearly not going to be Rabbi, because 1 second, no, put to death, that would fit with Rabbi. So Shmuel would fit perfectly with Rabbi, but the Gemara doesn't see it like this. Why? Because there's another opinion here which the Gemara would like Shmuel to go with. The Chachamim Maimrim ein chatas mesa ela shenimtus lacher sheneskaper bailam. The Chachamim say there's a difference. When did you find the second one? If you found the second one before you when did you find your first one that you lost? If you found it before you offered the second one, then that's true that it's raya, that you let it pasture. But if you found it after you brought the second one, then it's put to death. Let's go back to a carbon taida. But if it was found before it was, the owners were brought the replacement, then it's raya, then it pastures. If that's the case, by a carbon taida, if you have both of them in front of you and you didn't bring it yet, you have both of them standing there, so then by the carbon taida, you only bring bread with one, not with the second one. Whichever one is first, you bring the bread. According to Shmuel, he says, well, by a chatas you let it pasture. That means that you have to bring bread with the second one as well. So this is a question on Shmuel. Now again, we said that Rabbi would fit perfectly, because Rabbi says that the second one dies, and which means that you don't bring bread with the carbon taida in the corresponding case. If I had a blackboard, this would be exactly what a blackboard is for. Should I clarify this again? What's happening?
Not a bad idea.
Let me clarify again, because it's a. We have two. For whatever reason, he has two animals here. You have two cases. Let's do this. Let's do. Here's the chatas. This is the taida. This is a little dirtier, older. Okay. No, I don't want to use the fruit. Someone may say that it's like a gift to the temple.
Gotcha.
This is just an example. So I have two chatas. Okay. Here's the first one, but he loses it, so he replaces the second one. Here's a carbon taida. I lost it, so I replaced it. Okay. So I have an option of bringing either one. I can bring either one. Doesn't matter. If I have them both in front of me, I can bring either one. Which one gets the bread? So whichever one I bring first gets the bread. Yeah. I brought this one first. This one gets the bread. Comes along Shmuel and says there's a rule here that if by a chatas the second animal, after you bring the first one, the second animal would be put to death, then by a taida you don't bring bread with it. But if by a chatas it would pasture, then by the taida you would have to bring bread with it. So he's going to bring one of them. The second one, what are we going to do with the second one here? Whatever he's going to do with the second one here is going to tell me if there's bread with this one. So Rabbi says, second one here dies. So okay, there's no bread with this. The Chachamim say, not necessarily does the second one die. It's possible that the second one pastures. When do we say that it pastures? If you find them both, if you find the one that was lost before the first one was offered, then it pastures. Okay, let's go back over here. According to this, I have them both in front of me. I'm going to bring one of them. I'll bring this one, let's say. So I'm going to bring bread with this. I'm going to have to bring bread with this also, according to the Shmuel. And the halacha is not like that. Halacha is I don't bring bread with this. That's that question. Okay, so the Gemara says,
Why can't you just offer them both at once?
by a carbon taida or by the chatas.
For carbon taida.
So carbon taida, I actually will offer them, but I'm only going to bring bread with one of them. By the chatas, I'm not allowed to bring it because it's a sin offering. I don't just bring a sin offering just for nothing. I was already atoned for. I can't bring another sin offering.
Just do another sin.